The school courtyard buzzed with the usual chaos of lunchtime, laughter, basketballs slamming against pavement, wrappers crinkling. But for Jaden, the new kid, it was noise with no meaning, just a storm he had to walk through alone. He moved with a slow, watchful step. His hoodie was up, hands tucked in his pockets, eyes scanning. A week in, and he had spoken to no one except teachers. Rumors had already started. Some said he'd transferred because he got expelled for fighting. Others said he just got out of juvie. Either way, no one really knew. And high school kids didn't need truth. Just a spark. That spark came in the form of Tyler and his crew. Tyler was the kind of guy who thrived on control. Captain of the wrestling team, born into money, with a cocky smile that always showed too many teeth. He liked making people flinch. And today, he had his sights set on the quiet one. "Hey, new kid," Tyler called, striding over with his friends fanning out behind him. "You lost or just socially challenged?" Jaden didn't respond, just kept walking calm. That silence, it only fueled Tyler. "I said." Tyler stepped into his path and shoved him back. "Where you headed, freak?" Jaden stood still, unmoved. His eyes slowly lifted to meet Tyler's. It was quiet now, that strange kind of quiet that takes over when something is about to explode. A few students nearby turned to look, phones discreetly raised. Tyler's smirk widened. "What, cat got your tongue? Or you one of those tough guys who thinks he's too cool to talk?" Again, nothing. Tyler chuckled. "Bet you think you're tough, huh?" All moody and mysterious. He faked a lunge and laughed when Jaden didn't even blink. "I think someone needs a reality check." In one sharp motion, Tyler's knee shot up toward Jaden's face, but what happened next wasn't what anyone expected. Jaden moved. Not just dodged, flowed, like water slipping through cracks. Tyler's knee hit empty air. In that same motion, Jaden's hand flashed out and caught Tyler's leg mid-air, twisted, and slammed him down flat on his back. There was a loud, collective gasp. Tyler groaned, disoriented, scrambling to his feet. Furious, humiliated, he charged like a bull. But Jaden was already moving. A step to the side, a hook to the ribs, a sweep to the legs. Tyler hit the ground again, harder this time. His friends rushed in. Mistake. Jaden didn't fight like a high school kid. He fought like someone who'd bled before, someone who'd been taught not to waste motion. Someone who knew what pain was and didn't fear it. One came at him from the left. He ducked under, elbowed him in the stomach, and used his momentum to flip him over his shoulder. Another tried to tackle him from behind. Jaden spun, dropped low, and swept his legs with brutal precision. Every movement was controlled, mechanical, efficient. Within 30 seconds, 4 guys were groaning on the ground. Jaden didn't even look winded. Silence. Phones were out. The entire courtyard had frozen. Even teachers were stunned, still halfway across the yard, unsure of how to respond. Jaden stood alone in the center of the chaos. Not triumphant, not angry. Still, he glanced down at Tyler, who was now backing away on all fours, dazed, mouth bloody, eyes wide with disbelief. Jaden finally spoke. Just 5 words. "Don't ever touch me again." Then he turned and walked away. That moment became legend. But the real story wasn't what happened that day. It was what came after. Jaden was called into the office. Of course he was. But by then, the video had gone viral. Not just locally, it hit major platforms. People recognized the style. An underground M&A coach even commented, "This kid is trained. Not street fighting, real combat conditioning. Someone taught him discipline." A word spread fast. Turned out Jaden had trained since he was 9. His older brother, a Marine-turned-martial arts instructor, had raised him after their parents died in a car crash. Jaden never talked about it. He didn't need to. Fighting for him wasn't violence. It was control. It was therapy. It was survival. The school didn't suspend him. Even they couldn't deny. It was self-defense, clean and precise. Tyler, he never bothered anyone again. Neither did his crew. In fact, Tyler quit the wrestling team, quietly. No one really asked why. They already knew. As for Jaden, he didn't become popular in the usual way. But people respected him. More importantly, they gave him space. And a few, the curious, the brave, the kind, they approached, slowly, genuinely. And Jaden started speaking more. Smiling sometimes. You'd catch him at the gym, helping a freshman learn footwork, or staying after school to teach breathing techniques to a girl with anxiety. He never bragged. Never showed off. But he changed the atmosphere. Not because he beat up bullies, but because he showed strength didn't have to be loud. And silence could be powerful. Sometimes, the kid who walks alone isn't broken. He's just been through battles you can't see, and sometimes the biggest mistake a bully makes is thinking silence means weakness. In Jaden's case, silence meant warning. And that warning came true. Fast, hard, and unforgettable. Jaden had been silent not just in school, but in life. Silence wasn't new to him. It was his armor, his shield, his language. From the outside, it looked like he didn't care. But in truth, silence was the result of everything he had been through, everything he had survived. He didn't always used to be like that. There was a time when Jaden was a loud, energetic kid, the kind who laughed too hard at cartoons, who asked too many questions in class, who hugged his parents every chance he got. But that all changed one rainy night when everything was ripped away. A drunk driver on the wrong lane, a crash that shattered metal and glass and bone, and in an instant, his world was gone. His mom, his dad, the warm safety of a family. Dead on the spot. Jaden had been in the back seat. He survived, but that night did something to him. It didn't just take his parents. It took his voice. He stopped talking for weeks. They said it was trauma, PTSD, shock. Maybe it was all of that. Or maybe it was just that words didn't mean anything anymore. What could you say that would make anything better? He was sent to live with his older brother, Marcus, who had just returned from service overseas. Marcus was a Marine, disciplined, hardened by combat, but still gentle with Jaden in ways that only someone who had seen war and loss could understand. Marcus didn't push Jaden to speak. He didn't tell him to cry or man up or get over it. What he did do was take Jaden to the gym. The first time they went, Jaden didn't want to move. He just stood by the wall, watching, distant. Marcus handed him gloves and said, "You don't have to talk. Just hit." So he did one punch, then another, then another. Something clicked. Something unlocked. Over the months, the gym became their language. No long conversations, just the sound of gloves on pads, the rhythm of footwork, the rush of breath. Jaden learned how to channel the chaos in his chest into strikes, into movement, into discipline. Marcus taught him not just how to fight, but why. "This isn't for violence," he'd say. "It's for control. The world will try to break you, Jay. This is how you make sure it doesn't." Jaden trained every day. Early mornings before school. Late nights. He studied movement, reaction time, pressure points, breathing. Not because he wanted to fight, but because it gave him structure, focus, power over the pain he couldn't express in words. Years passed. His body grew stronger, his mind sharper. But his voice never really returned the way it was before. When they moved to a new city and Jaden enrolled in that high school, he knew what it meant to be the new kid. He'd done this before. He knew the stares, the whispers, the tests people gave to size you up. Most of the time, he stayed invisible. But some people couldn't leave well enough alone. Tyler was one of those people. What Tyler never realized was that Jaden's silence wasn't fear. It was restraint. When Jaden dismantled him and his friends in front of the entire courtyard, it wasn't because he wanted to hurt them. It was because he was done being tested. He didn't strike in anger. He struck with precision, with purpose. He didn't humiliate Tyler. Tyler humiliated himself by assuming that strength always looked loud and flashy. That fight lasted under a minute, but it shattered the unspoken hierarchy in the school. The pecking order was rewritten, not by force, but by something deeper, respect. Even teachers, though they couldn't admit it aloud, recognized what Jaden did. It wasn't just self-defense. It was self-control under pressure most people would have cracked under. The video that circulated online painted him as a kind of teenage vigilante, but Jaden hated the attention. He didn't want to be a legend. He wanted peace, a normal life. But he also knew he could never be normal. Again, not after the things he'd seen, the losses he carried, the scars he wore inside. The thing was, Jaden didn't hate Tyler. He pitied him. Because Tyler didn't understand that real fighters aren't made in the ring. They're made in silence. In hospital waiting rooms, in funerals, in empty rooms filled with echoes of laughter that will never return. Over time, Jaden started to open up, not with everyone, but with a few. A girl named Alina, who had social anxiety and used to eat lunch alone in the library. He sat with her one day without saying a word. She didn't run. Over the next few weeks, they started trading notes. Then words. Then conversations. A freshman named Malik, who wanted to learn boxing but was too scared to ask. Jaden noticed him watching from the hallway one day, so he invited him after school. Taught him how to wrap his hands, how to breathe, how to move. These weren't big gestures, just quiet acts of guidance, but they spread. Jaden became known not for that one fight, but for what he didn't do afterward. He didn't gloat. He didn't threaten. He didn't challenge anyone. He just lived with a quiet code. And eventually, people saw the difference. There's something magnetic about someone who doesn't need attention to feel powerful. Jaden didn't walk through school like he owned it. He walked like he didn't owe anyone anything. Like he'd already been through worse than anyone could imagine, and still stood tall. People stopped looking at him like a mystery. They started looking at him like an example. Not because he could win fights, but because he knew who he was. Most people are still trying to figure that out. Jaden had already answered the question. And the truth is, that answer had nothing to do with his fists. It came from the nights he cried alone, but showed up anyway. The mornings he didn't want to get out of bed, but still trained. The pain he carried quietly, without ever asking the world to feel sorry for him. That's what made him brutal. Not his hits, but his ability to endure. In the end, Jaden didn't just survive the bullies. He changed the school. He made people think twice before judging someone by how loud they talk or how tough they look. He reminded them that the strongest ones often don't say much, because they've already fought battles no one else has seen. And sometimes, all it takes to shut down cruelty is one person who refuses to stay silent when it truly matters. Not with words, but with actions that speak louder than any voice ever could. Jaden's restraint was the real story. Not the punches, not the takedowns, not the sudden fame from a viral video. What set him apart wasn't what he did to the bullies, but what he chose not to do. Most people didn't notice it in the moment. All they saw was a quiet kid dismantle 4 bigger guys in under a minute. But if you watch closely, you'd see he didn't hit anyone more than once. He didn't kick them when they were down. He never went for the face unless it was necessary to block or deflect. He could have broken bones. He could have humiliated Tyler beyond recovery, but he didn't. That kind of control doesn't come from ego. It comes from pain, from discipline, from loss. Jaden had been through enough in life to understand that real strength isn't about hurting people. It's about knowing when not to. Every movement he made during that fight was calculated, clean, without anger. That restraint was what left the deepest impression. Tyler's crew expected rage, wild swinging, screaming. Instead, they got silence and precision. And that silence spoke louder than anything else that day. After the fight, Jaden didn't gloat. He didn't post about it, didn't replay the footage or brag. In fact, he didn't even mention it again. When students approached him with praise or curiosity, he just nodded, maybe offered a small smile. Then he went back to his routine, classes, gym, walking home. No new swagger, no ego trip, just the same quiet presence. That was what made people respect him. Not fear, respect. There's a difference. Fear is forced. Respect is earned. Even teachers noticed. One of them, Mr. Keller, a former coach and veteran himself, pulled Jaden aside a week after the incident and said, "You held back. I saw it." Most grown men wouldn't have. Jaden didn't respond. He just nodded. But that nod said everything. Marcus had once told him, fighting is easy. What's hard is walking away when you know you could end it all in one hit. Jaden lived by that code. Every day. And not just physically. He walked away from drama, from gossip, from the temptation to let the pain inside him spill out onto others. That self-control made him dangerous. But more than that, it made him whole. In a world full of people screaming for attention, Jaden's silence was his power. Because silence from a place of strength is never weakness. It's a message. It says, I've already survived worse than you could ever do to me. And that quiet confidence. That was what truly made the bullies realize they had picked the wrong target.